Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Nazanin Ash, the CEO of Welcome.us, and I'm so privileged to join today with my fellow colleagues from the International Rescue Committee and the Refugee Advocacy Lab. I came to this role with Welcome.us after 5.5 years as the head of global policy and advocacy with the International Rescue Committee, where I was privileged to be among the co-founders, together with Refugees International and the International Refugee Assistance Project and the International Rescue Committee of the Refugee Advocacy Lab. And now I lead Welcome.us, which is a new national initiative built across all major divides to inspire and empower the American people to welcome and support those seeking refuge here, starting with our new Afghan neighbors. We were launched in response to the challenge of resettling 100,000 Afghan newcomers in less than 6 months, and we brought together a diverse team of dozens of leaders led by a Welcome Council whose honorary co-chairs include 3 former presidents and 3 former first ladies, but importantly, dozens of the nation's most passionate welcomers from all corners, who came together with the U.S. government, with governors and mayors from across the country, the private sector, and hundreds of frontline civic and service organizations to build a center of gravity and national platform dedicated to unleashing the most significant all-country private and civic sector response to the needs of newcomers by mobilizing businesses and civic associations and frontline groups and veteran and faith and diaspora leaders, philanthropists, and the public to work in tandem with state and local governments to respond to the crisis through their many, many acts of welcome, and at the same time to channel the energy of a motivated and unusually united public to renew Americans' identity as welcomers and inspire new participation in welcoming and building an enduring commitment to the act of welcoming. The work of this convening is part and parcel of our shared mission to ensure that newcomers are resettled safely and with dignity and with every opportunity to succeed and make their extraordinary contributions to our communities and our economies. So we thank you all for attending this second States Lay the Foundation virtual summit, where is refugee and immigrant workforce inclusion. And the fact that over 500 of you registered for this event on the Friday before many are going on vacation for a much needed holiday break is testament to how important this topic is. As we're experiencing now with our Afghan allies, for decades, resettled refugees and new Americans have arrived here with incredible skills and talents, but in many cases, that talent has gone untapped. When we face such critical workforce shortages, we cannot ignore this disconnect. So today's event will include refugee leaders who have critical skills and experience, the World Education Service, which is a nonprofit entity assessing international credentialing for parity with U.S. requirements, and who drives policy change impacting workforce development. You'll hear from a bipartisan panel of state elected officials who are working to make change in their states. You'll hear from the University of Vermont Health Network on their creative approach to hiring and upskilling to attract talent. And you'll also hear from Senator Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, who, while she couldn't join in person today, wanted to share details of new legislation bridging the gap for new Americans. You'll learn about the personal impact on refugees and immigrants who are denied access to their chosen professions. You'll hear trends and best practices for crafting policies that consider the training and education of newly arrived refugees and immigrants and tools for how to tap into that talent. And you'll learn about the role that states can play in leading on crafting policies that can address the tremendous untapped potential in their communities, and how those policies not only connect people and communities with employment opportunities, but can serve as a magnet for attracting new talent to their states. And you'll have the chance to hear from leaders who are working to advance policies that are enabling refugees and immigrants to reach their full potential, and who are creatively investing in the training and education to upskill in order to meet critical workforce needs. I'm really excited to introduce you to our keynote speaker for the day, Lubab Al-Qurashi. Lubab is a refugee Congress delegate from New Jersey, and she came to the U.S. from Iraq in 2014 with her husband and children. In Iraq, Lubab was a practicing surgical pathologist and an assistant professor of medicine at Baghdad Medical College. Now she works as a licensed pathologist assistant in a medical lab in New Jersey, and during the COVID pandemic, Lubab volunteered to be on the front lines of COVID testing and secured a temporary license to practice medicine made possible by an executive order from Governor Murphy. She's the living embodiment of the talent that we can tap into across our nation when bold leaders take action to smooth the pathways for that talent to achieve its full potential. And I'm so excited to turn it over to her for our keynote address today.
Thank you so much for this amazing introduction. Hi, this is Lubab Al-Qurashi, a former refugee from Baghdad, Iraq, and international physician from Baghdad, Iraq, practicing medicine for more than 10 years. Today, I would like to tell you that everybody living in USA should have an equal opportunity of work. But unfortunately, the internationally trained people like me who are U.S. citizens or even green card holder are not given an equal opportunity. There's 100,000 of international physicians like me have been put aside and were not recognized well. We are well trained. I received myself 12 years of training at Baghdad, Iraq, and I was practicing for almost 10 years. I was providing an excellent service to the community. And I was able to prove that we are valid during the pandemic by working the front line in the COVID fight under the executive order of Governor Paul Murphy for the temporary medical license. Today, I'm asking for a recognition or a path or a program for us to better invest in us. I considered myself as a lost talent. It is better to invest in us in a better way. It was really desperate for me when I came to US looking for peace, looking for a new life, to start over, to be disappointed and not given an equal opportunity. I was assuming that it was easy for me to resume my work and to practice medicine. But I was asked to sit for an exam that has nothing to do with the practical world. Today, I'm asking you to find a path for me and for 100,000 people like me, and to invest in us to serve our community. We are part of USA. I am a US citizen, and people like me, or 100,000 people like me, have been ignored for a long time. It's the time for us to be treated with dignity, especially when I watch the news that there is an extreme shortage in the healthcare worker, especially in the mental health, in the National Guard. So it is the time to be better and invested in a better way. I don't want for the newcomer, the Afghani people, to go through what I'm going through. I end up desperate. I end up looking for anybody to recognize me. I would like to tell you a story. You may find it silly, but it meant a lot to me, and I'm looking for answer from you. When I came to US, I was looking to work as a physician in USA, and whenever I applied for a job, they tell me you don't have the license. Then I start to apply for a job that are unrelated to medicine, and when I put my resume as a physician, they said, "Oh, you are overqualified, so we cannot hire you." So where should I go? What is my position? What is my category? What is my category? What is my title in USA? I believe I am lost in this country. After 6 years living in USA and becoming a US citizen, I don't feel until this point that I am settled. I love my specialty. I love my work. And I was proved to be valid for 6 months only during the pandemic. So during the pandemic, I was able to practice medicine. And that was only based on my training, my expertise from my country of origin. And this proved that we can do the job. So today, again, for the third time, I'm asking you to listen to me and for 100,000 people like me, and to find a path, to find a program, to better invest in us, and to feel like that we are respectful with dignity. Thank you.
Wow, Lubab, thank you so much for those powerful comments. It is just time right now to include individuals like yourselves in our workforce so that you can fully contribute to our society. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so pleased to welcome you to our second legislative summit in our States Lay the Foundation series. My name is Sarah Sheffer, and I'm the Director of Communications at Refugees International and the Acting Director of the Refugee Advocacy Lab. The Lab is an initiative of Refugees International, the International Refugee Assistance Project, the International Rescue Committee, and Refugee Congress. The Lab's mission is to grow the diverse constituency of support for refugee inclusion in the United States. We do it by building partnerships, supporting inclusive policies and initiatives, and developing strategic communications products for the common good. We are so excited to have the chance to connect with you today and share these best practices that state legislators are advancing on this issue. Let's get started with a couple of logistics in navigating the webinar.net platform. If you have any technical challenges, you can access support with the question mark for the Q&A on the far left column of your screen. We encourage you to review the resource box and download any content that might be of interest to you. It includes some of the legislation you'll hear about today and some additional supporting content as well. You can adjust the content of your screen by expanding or minimizing the media play, speakers list, and resources to meet your preferences. For those of you who registered in advance, thank you so much for doing so. And for those of you who are just joining us on the live stream, we have a stacked agenda for the next hour and a half. In just a minute, we'll hear from Jackie Exposito, the Director of Policy at World Education Services. She'll provide an overview of policy trends and best practices being introduced and implemented in states across the country. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jackie, and invite you to turn on your camera.
Thanks so much, Sarah. So exciting to be here today. Lubab is a very hard act to follow, but I will do my best. So thanks so much to the Refugee Advocacy Lab and IRC for hosting this important conversation on state efforts to match the experience and training of refugees and immigrants with their critical workforce needs. It's an honor to be here today to represent World Education Services. I'll tell you a bit about WES before I start. WES is a nonprofit social enterprise dedicated to ensuring international students, immigrants, and refugees achieve their educational and career goals in the US and in Canada. Through WES's Global Talent Bridge program, WES joins with institutional partners, community-based organizations, and policymakers to promote policies and promising models so that immigrants and refugees who hold international credentials can advance in their careers. WES is also host to Immigrant, a national advocacy coalition driving reform at the state and federal level. We were proud to welcome the Refugee Advocacy Lab as a new member of our coalition this year. And lastly, WES's philanthropic arm, the Wes Miriam Asefa Fund, supports leaders and organizations working to build more inclusive economies. 2021 has been a difficult year to say the least, but a bright spot has been the strong commitment across states to promote more inclusive policies. At least a dozen states enacted policies to promote equity and inclusion in their communities and workforces in 2021. These include the creation of 4 new statewide offices of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in Colorado, Oregon, Illinois, and Maryland, bringing the nationwide total of statewide offices of New Americans to 12. 2021 also saw critical reforms aimed at increasing pathways to licensure, for immigrants and refugees like Lubab, including the first of its kind medical licensing law in Washington state, which provides a limited license to international medical graduates. And important investments in workforce development training and adult education for immigrants and refugees were made in many states this year, but our work is certainly not done. At the federal level, we've seen some momentum too. As we heard, the Improving Opportunities for New Americans Act, introduced in the House of Representatives, and its companion bill, the Bridging the Gap for New Americans Act in the Senate, have broad bipartisan support and have been endorsed by more than 120 organizations from across the United States. This legislation calls upon the U.S. Department of Labor to study the factors that impact employment opportunities of internationally trained immigrants and refugees like Lubab. The study's findings would help states as they seek to promote more inclusive policies and meet their workforce needs. We'll hear more about some of these state and federal efforts today. The need is clear. By 2050, 83% of growth in the working age population will come from immigrants and their children. As we know, immigrants and refugees have brought significant education and experience to the U.S. workforce. More than 60% of newly arrived immigrants aged 25 or older had at least a bachelor's degree in 2017. Yet, according to data from the Migration Policy Institute, systemic barriers lead to the underemployment and unemployment of at least 2 million college-educated immigrants and refugees in the U.S. 60% of these individuals hold international credentials. Shockingly, more than 250,000 immigrants and refugees with health degrees are under or unemployed in the U.S. And as we heard from Lubab, 165,000 of these talented individuals hold international credentials. Now is clearly the time to ensure no qualified worker is left behind. As the U.S. faces critical healthcare staffing shortages and shortages in other key sectors, there are opportunities for reform. There is also an opportunity as the U.S. builds its infrastructure to welcome refugees, to reimagine workforce development, adult education, and licensing policies, and how they intersect with the refugee resettlement framework. No one seeking refuge in the United States should be prevented from rejoining their careers or from moving up on the career ladder. States can play a pivotal role in the work ahead. As we are seeing across the U.S., states are instrumental to promoting more inclusive workforces. WEST tracks state and federal policies impacting immigrants and refugees who hold international credentials. Here are some of the trends we've been seeing in the states. Increased public investments in workforce development training and adult education. Occupational licensing reforms to remove barriers preventing immigrants and refugees from advancing in their careers, particularly in the health sector. The establishment of statewide offices of immigrant and refugee affairs, and the creation of task forces, commissions, and studies that identify barriers and solutions to economic mobility. This is often the first step a state takes to promote more inclusive workforces. A task force or a study can provide foundational data, can identify the problem, and lead to recommendations for reform. It's been encouraging to see greater awareness and acknowledgement across the political spectrum that the U.S. must act to address underemployment of immigrants and refugees. The goal ahead for us now is to harness this recognition into policy change. WEST seeks to achieve this in a few different ways. First, by engaging state policymakers through the Offices of New Americans Network, which we co-convene with our partners at the New American Economy. The ONA Network is a forum comprised of senior public officials focused on promoting more inclusive communities. The network provides a space for state policymakers to share best practices and models, identify any challenges they may be facing in their states, as well as any areas for reform. WES is also working to build consensus for reform through our Untapped Talent campaign, launched in 2021. The campaign, which is endorsed by more than 55 and counting national, state, and local organizations from across the country, shares the stories of individuals who have been prevented from restarting their careers in the U.S. due to a lack of recognition of their international credentials. Lubab has been very gracious in sharing her story as part of our campaign. We hope the campaign will inform policymakers on the critical need for reform and engage new partners in our efforts to increase economic mobility. With that, I'll close so we can get to our next panel. I look forward to the rich discussion today and hearing from the trailblazers who are leading the way on developing more equitable and inclusive workforces. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jackie. It's so impressive to hear about all of the work that's already taking place and all the opportunities that still remain for those who are interested. I'm very excited to advance us to our next segment now and ask our speakers to join us on camera at this time. Basma Alawi is the National Campaign Director for We Are All America. She leads a network of refugee leaders and grassroots organizers across the country to engage communities in building support for refugee resettlement. We also welcome Virginia Delegate Kathy Tran. Delegate Tran fled Vietnam with her parents as refugees when she was just a baby. Before joining the legislature, she spent over a decade at the Department of Labor and today brings her combined experience to talk about legislation she plans to introduce in 2022, which will help meet the teacher gap that the state of Virginia is facing. Joining Delegate Tran is Representative John Macko of Wisconsin. Representative Macko is a native of Wisconsin and the founder of two businesses. He joined the legislature in 2014 and since then has served as chair of Ways and Means and vice chair of the Joint Audit Committee. From Colorado, we're also joined by Kit Taintor, who's the senior advisor on New Americans to Governor Paulus. She formerly served as the Colorado State Refugee Coordinator. Basma and our panelists, over to you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for such an amazing webinar and really informative start. And also, I want just to thank all the organizations who have put this together. And to introduce myself, as Sarah mentioned, I am Basma Alawi, a former refugee myself, who her career started as engineering and moving to the state as a refugee back in 2010. I needed to navigate the system and start my own new career, which I am really excited about, but in the same time have many friends who are doctors, engineers, teachers, who struggled and still struggling to find their way to really reclaim their career here in the United States. Thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. And I think we can start right away with Delegate Tran. Last year, you introduced a measure through the budgetary process to create a workforce study in the state. And this year, you plan to introduce a bill specific to relicense for educators. Can you tell us more about the legislation you are planning to introduce and what informed your decision to go in this direction?
Thank you. Can you hear me? There we go. Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Kathy Tran, and I represent parts of southeast southern Fairfax County, located in Northern Virginia, in the House of Delegates. And since I was elected in 2017, I've tried really hard to be a leader in making sure that Virginia is more welcoming and inclusive, and just so proud of the work we've been able to do to date, both to support immigrants and refugees in Virginia. But we still have a ways to go, and you were referencing last year we started a study of workforce opportunities and challenges facing Virginia's refugees. And I think later on today we'll talk about some of the things we've learned from how to conduct a study. But over and over again, either both through that process and the recommendations that came out of the stakeholder work group, as well as in conversations I have with resettlement agencies in Virginia and advocates and refugees themselves, is how do we reduce the barriers for individuals to be able to fulfill their full career potential. So what are the barriers, whether it's licensure, certification, education, or other employment and skills opportunities. And so one of the big issues we're facing in Virginia, like so many states, is a teacher shortage. I was just, reading, again, refreshing my memory, that just in the last 3 years, we have unfilled education positions, the number has grown by 62%. So in the 2018-2019 school year, we had 877 unfilled positions. And in the 2020-2021 school year, there were 1,420. So that's an incredible increase. It's been exacerbated by the pandemic. And so wanting to make sure that we're able to meet this need by allowing individuals who have been credentialed to teach from their home country be able to get a provisional teacher's license in Virginia. And then as they are teaching, and they will have an opportunity to go through the licensure process just like any other Virginian. We currently have almost 120 internationally credentialed teachers who are here on special visas. So I think that our communities are used to tapping into an international trained teacher talent pool. So let's make sure that we're doing that with Virginians who are here and seeking to teach as well. So I'm really excited about this opportunity. And I know that the refugee resettlement community is going to be strong advocates and working in partnership with us, but also we're going to be reaching out to others who might be really interested in this issue as well to see if we can get them on board too.
Thank you so much. And I think we have more time for one more question to you, Delegate Tran, which is I'm really interested to hear about. So as the Vice Chair for Policy of the newly created AAPI caucus, you have had a lot of activity in the last few months and been outspoken in support of welcoming and resettling Afghans during and after the fall of Kabul. How does this legislation tie into the broader ambitions and goals of the caucus?
Yeah, no, thank you so much. So this past spring, we started the Asian American Pacific Islander Caucus in the Virginia General Assembly for the first time ever. And we now have 6 members, and we're really, really excited to be able to kind of harness our lived experiences, our professional kind of expertise, and our work in the General Assembly to lift up the voices of the AAPI community. And the refugee experience of escape and resettlement is one that really speaks to the AAPI community. I came as a refugee when I was almost 2 years old, and so we feel so much kinship with Afghans who are coming and living in Virginia now, particularly where I live and represent in Northern Virginia. It's become kind of a destination for many Afghans because we already have a large community there, and people want to get reconnected and reunited with their family, and so we're doing a lot of work to welcome Afghans. And I think we're all very aware of how under the previous federal administration, the refugee resettlement programs have been really decimated, and even some in Northern Virginia were on the brink of closure. And so the surge in Afghans coming has, quite frankly, I think overwhelmed the system. And so it's required a lot of partnerships between the resettlement agencies and volunteer-led community groups. They're not even formal, 501c3 organizations, right? But they're groups of volunteers who come together. And so I've been doing a lot of work to make sure, to help connect what's happening at the state level with the services that are available through our county to the refugee resettlement agencies themselves, as well as the volunteer groups. And one of the AAPI caucus that I just spoke about, one of our priorities coming into this upcoming legislative session is to make sure that we strengthen refugee resettlement services in Virginia. So we had pushed for and just got into the governor's biannual budget about $8 million to help with 2 things. One, to help people who are limited English proficient navigate our social systems through a public benefits navigator, so helping you connect to all the different services that you might need in order to, thrive. And then also to award competitive grants to refugee resettlement agencies to be able to provide additional services, whether it's employment, legal, housing, and others. So we're really excited about having that in the governor's budget, and I hope that as we move into this session and under a new administration, we'll be able to continue these investments to strengthen the services and supports we're able to provide to our new neighbors.
Thank you so much for all your work, and really exciting to hear all of these upcoming funding and legislations that could really support the newcomers. And we have more questions in the end, but I would love to move on to Representative Mako. Thank you so much for joining us. And the question is, this year you authored a bill that would allow discretion for police departments to hire non-citizens, a significant barrier for many who are interested in joining the police force. Can you tell us more about this issue and the current status of this bill?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Our bill is very, very narrow and focused. Some of the issues that some of the other panelists are talking about are very, very interesting. And I think because of the recalcitrance of the U.S. Congress in various administrations to really address the immigration problem, we see that it's left up to states, very much like we had to overturn the Quill decision with Wayfair. That was done on a state level basis through our affiliation with NCSL, and I think we're in the same situation here. So our bill specifically addresses the DACA kids, those roughly 650,000 kids that are roughly from 17 to 32 years old right now, that this is really the only country that they knew. And in the state of Wisconsin, they are allowed to be state troopers, because a state trooper is guided under the Department of Transportation regulations. They're allowed to serve honorably in the military because that is guided under the Department of Defense statutes. They are allowed to be corrections officers because that's governed under the Corrections Department. They are allowed to be DNR agents and carry a gun and be agents there. They are not allowed to be city policemen or county policemen because that's under the Department of Justice regulations. So what our bill does is it simply brings parity to the various law enforcement agencies in the state of Wisconsin that would allow DACA kids specifically to serve as city or county police officers. And I was approached by our law enforcement here in Green Bay. And for those of you that live in Chicago, I'm sorry we kicked your butt last weekend. So I was approached by law enforcement that said, look, if you want us to have additional diversity into our workforce, then for the love of Pete, let us hire these people that would represent that diverse community. Interestingly enough, when Representative Stephan and I rolled out the bill, we got an awful lot of press from it, as you can imagine, both good and bad. I was called a Trump toady and a rhino, both in the same day. And so that's always a fun day. But immediately, this particular officer got contacted by the state troopers who said, man, this is fantastic. You are exactly the kind of person we want on the state force. He was immediately recruited, went through their program, and he now proudly serves the state of Wisconsin as a state trooper at the expense of what could have been a great officer for the city of Green Bay. Our bill did pass committee virtually unanimously. We had one negative vote. Other than that, it was a unanimous decision. It is now awaiting floor approval and waiting on Senate approval. So we're hoping that that moves forward. And I think those are some of the things. As an employer, I actually came from business. We have 500 or 600 employees now in the state of Wisconsin, Tennessee, and Florida. And it seems to me if there were ever a group of people that I wanted in my employ, it is somebody who is fully vetted every 2 years, that is willing to pay $500, drive to Milwaukee, which is 2 hours south of here, to renew their permit. These are quality, young, dynamic individuals that love what America stands for, that love the opportunity to be part of Wisconsin. And so in addition to this DACA bill relative to law enforcement, we're looking at other things that we could do here in the state of Wisconsin that would allow DACA kids to have to pay in-state tuition, to have other licensing. It's staggering to me that a DACA kid can't serve as a registered nurse. We need nurses. And so if you've got a DACA kid that wants to go in a nursing program, they can't. They can't hold a state Wisconsin license to be a nurse. That's nuts. They can't be a dog walker or a hair groomer. This is crazy. So we're looking, and again, with my role through NCSL, we're looking at creating some text legislation that could then be part of their immigration platform. I apologize. It looks like there's a line right through the middle of my head. So that's kind of what we're doing here in the state of Wisconsin.
That's amazing. I think as a follow-up into this question is, it seems like a similar bill was passed earlier this year in Utah.
Oh,
and
great.
It seems like there is increasing focus on citizenship requirements to join law enforcement. How did you learn that this was a challenge, and what do you believe the benefits of legislation will be?
Right. It literally was a grassroots thing. The chief of police simply called me and go, John, this is ridiculous. Why can't I hire this kid? And so we reviewed why and came up with the understanding that there were 5 different agencies that guide what type of law enforcement governs what, and that they're not all the same. And so our bill seeks to add parity to those bills so that they all have the same latitude. And the benefits, I think, are really quite self evident, is that you would have a greater diverse, you'd have, first of all, you'd have, regardless of color, you'd have dynamic quality individuals that simply want to be here and want to serve. And that can be fully vetted and qualified. That's number one. I don't care what flavor they are. The second issue, though, is that they would be able to identify with some of those communities and allow us to do a better job with all of the things that we saw last year throughout the country. And so if we had folks that could at least diffuse a situation right at the outset, with being able to either speak the language or have something in common with who we're talking with, I think that serves us all very, very well.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you so much, Representative Mako, and I know we will come back to you as well. I think now I have a couple of questions to the Colorado Senior Advisor for New Americans Kid Trainer. So the pandemic highlighted the existing shortage of healthcare workers across the U.S., including physicians. What steps has Colorado taken to try and elitize the skills of foreign trained physicians already living in the United States?
Thanks, Padma, and thanks to Delegate Tran and Representative Marco for being part of this panel. I'm not an elected, but I work alongside a lot of our delegates here in Colorado, so it's nice to see you guys from other states. So basically, we recognized early, and I think other states like Virginia and New Jersey did as well, that this pandemic would require innovation and flexibility. And Delegate Tran and Representative Marco may or may not agree with my next statement, but I think bureaucracies work well in times of urgency because folks are able to pluck ideas that have been percolating around out of the idea frame and put it into action in a relatively quick way, and that's what we've been able to do here in Colorado. And in terms of foreign trained physicians. So we have about 2,000 foreign trained healthcare professionals here in our state, so less than Delegate Tran, but still a really important group of folks to be working on, especially as we shared those beginning stories about what it means for one person. It's definitely one of those circumstances where it might not be a huge number of people, but it creates such huge changes for people that we're able to move on. So note, we've been long aware that there's challenges for our foreign trained professionals, but the pandemic did open an opportunity for us. And they opened an opportunity because we were relaxing barriers for other foreign trained professionals. And so we've issued an executive order, much like some of our other states that granted temporary licensures in the beginning months of the pandemic. And so foreign trained professionals were granted the ability to apply for license as part of this greater effort. I want to, also mention that Colorado is also focused on how we change our healthcare systems in ways that can help all Coloradans. And so as we are making changes for our foreign trained physicians, we're also making changes at large, and that includes those in our immigrant community who have access to education here, like Representative Marco was talking about. And so we are looking at all different sorts of actions that we may be able to do. And the governor signed last year a bill that dropped lawful presence for occupational licenses, including those in the healthcare area. And that really helps address some of the issues that Representative Marco brought up around sort of folks that have been trained in our educational systems but aren't able to sort of take that next step to make sure that they've got licenses in order to practice.
Such impressive work all around, and I think I am really interested to even learn more and see how we can really support you on the ground. I think as a follow-up question to you, so the governor and 13 state legislatures asked an existing commission to look at opportunities for international medical school graduates to practice in Colorado. Nurse physicians study performed early this year. Can you share some of the outcomes of the study and the recommendations with the audience?
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks so much for asking this question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, you froze here for a minute. I think I'm having some camera or internet difficulties. But thanks for bringing up the topic. You know, we have an existing commission at our Department of Regulatory Agencies, which is called the Nurse Physician Advisory Task Force for Colorado Healthcare. And it's a healthcare policy task force that's housed within the Division of Professions and Occupations, and it was created all the way back in 2009. Its purpose is to promote public safety and improve healthcare in Colorado by facilitating communication between the practices of nursing and medicine. And its focus in the Division of Professions and Occupations is really unique because it is really policy focused. The governor appoints the task force. There are 12 members comprised of 5 physicians, 5 nurses, and 2 consumer representatives. One is a physician from the Colorado Medical Board, and one is a nurse representative from the State Board of Nursing. So the fact that we had this existing commission and the support that it already had from our state staff just offered us like a really great opportunity to ask the commission to pick up this particular topic and really study it in depth with the subject matter experts within our Division of Professions and Occupations. And so the recommendations were made public in August, and there are 6. So I'll kind of go through them really quickly, but note that the recommendations are public, so folks can go and look at them at any time and see how they might apply to your particular state, to your particular context. So of the 6 recommendations, 3 are licensure focused. One of those recommendations is to equalize the clinical experience requirements for full licensure of residents. Currently here in Colorado, it is 1 year for those trained in the US and 3 years for those trained internationally. So one of the recommendations is just to equal the playing field. And this is really important for folks that are pursuing residency here in our state, because as you guys might be aware, it's full licensure, you can bill at a higher rate, which is important for the financial health of a lot of our hospital institutions. And so we feel like by equalizing the residency requirements that we're also reducing barriers, or an additional barrier that international medical school graduates may have when they apply for residency. One of the second recommendations is to reimagine some of our existing licensure pathways. So we have something called the reentry license pathway. And this is for physicians who, for whatever reason, have their license has lapsed and they need to reapply for that license. So the IMPACT is recommending that the Colorado Medical Board re-envisions this pathway to also provide opportunity for foreign trained physicians who had a license in good standing in their home countries and have recent clinical experience to use that same pathway as U.S. sort of trained folks to re-enter their careers. And so we're really excited in particular about that one, because again, it provides parity between the 2 different populations and getting them back into the workforce through that licensure pathway really quickly. And then the third piece is a reimagining of another current license that we have in Colorado. It's called the Distinguished Foreign Teachers License. And what it basically is it allows our universities, and namely the University of Colorado, to bring in distinguished physicians from overseas to help teach within their university and practice on site. Currently, there is no pathway for them to sort of get a different type of license here in Colorado. So if they wanted to leave that teaching arrangement and go practice in one of our rural communities, there's not an opportunity for them to do that. So we just want to reimagine that license as something towards permanency versus what it is now, which is a little bit of a temporary and more restricted license. The remaining 3 recommendations are kind of more programmatic, but they create the pipeline to those licenses that we just talked about. So what we learned during the pandemic is you can't just open a door, you also have to build a path. And so these recommendations also speak to the need not only to reduce barriers, but also create opportunities. So one of those is a clinical ready assessment program that would provide folks with clinical experience as well as an assessment to that clinical experience that the Colorado Medical Board could utilize to grant those reentry licenses that I just talked about before. So they would be able to feel comfortable in granting that reentry license because there would be a test and recent clinical experience that they could point back to know that that person could practice quality healthcare here in Colorado.
The second piece, or another recommendation, is just to create kind of a career navigation type of program. Foreign trained professionals come from all sorts of different countries, backgrounds. They might have recent clinical experience. It might be 10 years since they practiced because they went through a protracted refugee situation. So we know that what it really takes is a really specialized career navigation to help people understand all of the different opportunities that they may have to rejoin their careers as physicians, or even, potentially look at another healthcare profession. And the third recommendation is earmarked residency slots. So Colorado, like in a lot of other states, like, Texas or even Virginia, have sort of bolstered their residency slots within their states. The University of Colorado right now gets 3,000 applicants for 50 residency slots, which is incredible. And so we already invest as a state into residency slots for high-need professions like family medicine. And so one of the recommendations is just to consider expanding that state investment to include earmarked residency slots for foreign-trained physicians to allow them to enter into that program a little bit more streamlined. So those are the big recommendations. Some are easier, I would say, than others, but all of them provide us a really good roadmap about how we move forward. And we learned a lot from other states, so thanks for those of you who have gone before us. We hope that our study also helps provide roadmaps for other states as well that are interested in the issue.
Perfect. Thank you so much for sharing all the recommendations. And I know there's a lot of things and follow-up questions that I have, but I know because of timing, there are a couple of questions I have for the three of you, so feel free to chime in. The first one is, we know we have a number of audience members today who are legislators in states across the country. Do you have any message you would share with them if they are interested in pushing legislation that might mirror your own bills? And how can they get started? Who should they connect with? All of these advice really going to be important for them to hear from you, because you have already started the path.
Well, I'll start out. I'll just chime in. I would just encourage everybody to take a look at it. First of all, identify and see if there's a problem. In the state of Wisconsin, again, we didn't have parity in hiring officers across the various fields in which officers could be hired. So just adding parity to that. I guess the second thing, though, is I would just say, you would have to, obviously you have to gain consensus to get anything done. You can't just go off half-cocked and come up with a crazy program on your own. But having said that, I want to tell everybody to be as emboldened as possible. Again, keep in mind, and I would suggest getting part of groups. I mentioned them a couple times, but it's just because I feel so important about it, is that groups like NCSL are doing phenomenal things in a very, very bipartisan way. It was our committee that through the South Dakota legislature under, at that time, Senator Deb Peters, chaired the SALT task force that challenged the Quill decision with Wayfair, moved it up through their Supreme Court, and got it all the way over to the U.S. Supreme Court and overturned that. That was done by a state legislature that allowed that to happen, not because the Congress was going to do it, because they weren't going to do it. That was led by the South Dakota State Legislature and the NCSL SALT Tax Committee that pushed that all the way through, that all the states now have parity with sales tax collected for brick and mortar stores versus online stores. So that was done on a local level. So I think we've got a great opportunity for us to fix some of these things. And I don't think we realize how much power we actually have. So I would encourage everybody to go ahead and do that. And if anybody wants our legislation, just get a hold of my office and we'll share it with you.
Thank you so much, Representative. Any other comments?
I think I would probably chime in and add, if you're a state legislator or a local elected official or a community leader, I think keeping a steady drumbeat on the needs of the immigrant refugee community is so important in all aspects. This year, I'm going to be doing a lot of work around language access. So I've been talking about language access as it intersects with environmental justice, language access as it intersects with healthcare, language access as it intersects with our workforce board. And I sit on the workforce board, and I saw some of the participants are also in employment and training services. And, there we were having a conversation around accessibility for people with disabilities, and the question was, hey, we were starting to look at this and include language access, and I was like, please do, because language access is thinking about not just people who are limited English proficient, but also people with disabilities that affect communication, right? So wherever you can is, we have this opportunity to use our megaphone and be like, pay attention to this issue and help to connect the dots for people. So that would be my one big recommendation, because this is the perspective and the love that we bring to this work, and that we can help amplify it. And the second is in looking at, how do you build a broad coalition? And so I'm now going to be in the minority party in the House, and we have a new incoming, our governor's Manchin switched parties in our last election. And so it's really important to think always about building that broad coalition, and whether it's speaking about issues from a refugee perspective and why this is helpful to the refugee, speaking about an issue about whether it's workforce or how it can help grow the economy, knowing your audience and building that broad coalition, and having, I think, a big tent approach to our work is going to be really important as well. And people get really fired up for different reasons, but sometimes being able to come to the same conclusion and work towards that goal. And I think what you see with Afghans coming right now, I think this resurgent interest in refugees, and making sure that we take care of refugees, that we stay welcoming, and that our government, provides the services it needs, the community is rallying around people on both sides of the party, or both sides of the aisle, and I think that's just really powerful. And so I think there's a moment right now, if we are able to meet it by raising these issues in a bipartisan way and a big coalition way, is also really good. If anybody is interested in kind of some of the things I've been working on, whether it's workforce or kind of thinking through our refugee resettlement programs and services or language access, feel free to reach out. Would be glad to connect.
Could I just interject 2 more seconds here? I want to completely agree with that, and I want to think probably, I don't know how many Republicans we have on this committee, but I'm one. And so I just want to let you all know that this is a bipartisan conversation, but to pitch it on my side of the conversation, I mean, the humanitarian component of it is absolutely fantastic. But to me, it can really be sold to some folks that may or may not share that approach outwardly by talking about the pure economics. This just simply makes economics to us. Again, like I mentioned, we have about 600 employees in 3 states, and I want to tell you, we will have Trump stickers and Biden stickers and Greenpeace stickers and NRA stickers in the parking lot, and I don't care. We have work to do. And so I think when we look at that, I think that is a commonality here in the state of Wisconsin. Maybe it's nowhere else in the country, but we've got an employment problem. We need a lot of people. And I have pictures, black and white pictures on my wall of my great-grandparents that immigrated here from Belgium, and my grandparents were able to do something, and my parents were able to do something, and I get to do this, and my kids are doing crazy things, and that has not died. That entrepreneurialism is still there. So I would just suggest one other approach, depending on the makeup. You were talking about minority versus majority in your situation. Depending on your particular situation, that approach makes a lot of sense. I mean, and that rising tide floats all boats. It is good for the immigrants, and it is good for our economy.
Thank you so much for both, and really glad to see both parties stepping in and supporting the work that's led by refugees and immigrants community. Before I jump into our last question, I want to make sure, do you have any other advice that we would like to share? It's all covered. I think the last question is, 2 of you had the benefit of seeing a state study implemented and then reviewing outcomes. Was there anything that surprised you about the process or the results? And would you recommend to attendees that implementing a state stay should be their first consideration?
We wanted to tackle in Virginia kind of professional licensure challenges, but then we had to take a step back and be like, well, what exactly are the challenges? What are the occupations we want to focus on? I was just having a conversation with somebody from our state Chamber of Commerce today. You can't wave a magic wand and then suddenly everybody who's foreign trained gets credentials or is able to enter their career pathway, right? Because every occupation has different requirements, and I put forward this study, and then it was like, what are the occupations and educational experiences that refugees coming to Virginia bring, and what are their challenges to getting into their particular career pathway that they want to be on? And the answer was, well, we don't know because we don't have that data. And so I thought that was really interesting. And so our report, I think, talks about building communities, gathering and disseminating best practices, helping to bridge those partnerships, providing tools and such. But at the heart of it, we still don't have that data. And so I saw Jackie Esposito was on earlier today, and we spoke recently. She reminded me that Pennsylvania had done like a census of refugees in Pennsylvania, and what were the skills and backgrounds they came with, what are they doing now, do they want, are they doing what they want to do, and what would they do differently type of census. And I think that's, to me, a really intriguing idea, and I'm hoping that as we're experiencing this new wave of refugees, that somebody's collecting that data so that we have some good information to help us think through what are best ways to help the Afghan community who's here. But I thought that's one lesson I learned. It's like, please help find the data. And they're like, the answer is, well, we don't have it, so we have to proceed in different ways. So that's really important.
I think to add on to what Delegate Tran was saying, and some of the things that Representative Mako said before, is that I think that a study, especially a study that pulls in your subject matter experts at your state agencies, can really plot a path forward that is attractive to a variety of different interest groups, a variety of different stakeholders, and bipartisan legislature, because what is rooted, a lot of the work, what is rooted is to move forward with reducing regulations, reducing barriers, creating equity, all of those types of things, that I think have tons of support from broad different stakeholder communities. And I would say that the most sort of surprising thing about our study was the opportunities to reimagine current licensing pathways. And so I think, again, that's one reason to bring in the subject matter experts, is because they know those pathways intimately. And as they're connected with voices about folks that have challenged reconnecting with their careers here in the United States, I think that really motivates folks to really think creatively and innovatively about those licensing pathways. And so again, I can't speak highly enough of including state subject matter experts into that conversation, because they have a lot of great ideas that can be brought to bear, and new ideas that advocates may not have thought about as they begin to answer the question of how we integrate foreign trained or highly skilled immigrants into our communities.
So can I add one additional thought? Is sometimes we feel the fierce urgency of now. We're like, we need to pass this bill and get this into law so we could start right now improving people's lives. And sometimes I do understand a study. You're like, oh my gosh, we kind of know what the issue is. Why are we going to take another year or a year and a half to study this issue and just talk about it? But I think I've come to realize the benefits of a study, taking that step back, bringing the partners and the stakeholders and the subject matter experts together, helps to deepen those relationships and gets you really important buy-in. It can, not always, right? But it can get you really important buy-in if you can agree to a set of recommendations that you can then use that political capital in pushing for change. And so, and if you're in a situation where you might not have the votes for a particular change, that broader stakeholder buy-in engagement is going to be really important when you're trying to advocate for a particular bill. And so in this space, in the refugee space, and in other spaces, I've been thinking a lot about how can we better utilize the study process and recommendations that come out of it. This is also exactly what I did with our big language access study that came out. We're going to be pushing that this year too, and that will also directly affect refugees, right? So just thinking of that as a potential strategy for achieving your goals.
Thank you so much.
The only thing that I would add to that is I think we're in a great opportunity here. And maybe I'm the old guy in the group here, but I vividly remember Reagan working with Tip O'Neill, and that they were rivals and not arch enemies. And so I think our common thread right now cuts across both fields. And so when we sat and looked at licensing, we sat and looked at the impact that it was having on DACA kids, for example, but more importantly, on the entire population. And so the reform I think that Kit was talking about, or maybe Kathy was talking about, it was actually a phenomenal byproduct of that conversation when we started asking ourselves, why in the hell are we licensing dog walkers in the first place? And so, and then preventing anybody from doing a job. So I think there's some really great opportunities here, and that we have a situation that I think needs to transcend what we see sometimes in rank and file media, and that there are some smart people on both sides of the aisle, and we share a common issue as how do we get these new and emerging Americans, and that's what I refer to them as, new and emerging Americans, to integrate into the system.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I really appreciate it. And as a recent refugee, I have been 10 years in this country and changed career because I couldn't navigate my system to claim my engineering here in the United States. I am really thankful for all the work that you are leading in your states, and hopefully the audience, with their leadership, were able to take what they have learned today to take it to their states. And I encourage everyone to reach out to these amazing leaders who are making a difference in their states and learn from them. Our segment's ended, and I know we will need to transfer to the next segment, but I really learned a lot. Thankful for all your leadership, and hopefully we will see you again in other spaces. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, Delegate Tran, Representative Mako, and Kit for joining us today and sharing those insights. And just showing, how much we have to gain and to lose if we do not get this right. And thank you so much to you all for your important leadership on these policy advancements. And Basma, thank you as always for moderating such a great discussion. We're not wrapped yet. I'm happy to keep the agenda moving and introduce you to our next two speakers, Megan Bronovsky and Elizabeth Madigan with the University of Vermont Health Network. Today, they're joining us to speak about a new partnership they're piloting with a program called Moving On, Moving Up, as well as some other recruitment efforts. So Megan and Elizabeth, over to you. And I think we have Megan right now. Elizabeth will join us very soon. But Megan, I'll turn things over to you now. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. Thanks everybody for inviting us to be here today and for allowing us to be a part of the conversation. It's so interesting to hear. I've been listening for a while, and so interesting to hear about the great work that's being done, especially around the areas of licensure for our nurses and for our physicians. So my name is Megan Bronovsky. As Sarah mentioned, I'm the manager of talent acquisition, mostly supporting nursing and nursing support recruitment at the University of Vermont Health Network. Been in the organization for just over 16 years. Most of that time really been focused on supporting our nursing leaders and finding the right talent to take care of our patients. As has been shared for a number of people, and I think most people are aware, these past 2 years have really been a struggle for us, but I don't think we're alone. It's just been a struggle for many healthcare organizations to attract and retain the crucial and vital workforce that is necessary to care for our patients. And that need has expanded, not only taking care of our COVID patients, but just the increased acuity and increased patient care needs across our region. In order to meet those needs, we really had to think creatively and how recruiting alone is not going to solve the problem and the shortages that we're seeing. It's really focusing on training, on upskilling, and reskilling our community and allowing greater access and removing barriers to our community members that can step in and fill those needs. Some of the ways we've been doing that, we've had some existing partnerships in the past with community organizations, but it really needed to think to expand those partnerships and really look at new ways and partnerships that we can tap into. Just one small example that we have recently implemented and are still in the middle of implementing, is a partnership with the City of Burlington, their Community Economic Development Office. We've been partnering with them and a couple of other local healthcare organizations to provide a licensed nurse assistant training program. Licensed nurse assistant, for those who are not familiar, is a support position within our nursing teams that really provides critical support to our patients and to the rest of the healthcare team. The program, it kicked off in May of this year with the first of 5 planned cohorts. It's been very popular. We've received only over 110 applications for that program, with a really significant piece of those applications coming from members of our region's underserved populations, many of whom were previously unemployed or underemployed. The program itself is a free program. It consists of 3 different pieces. One is a technical component, and that has actually been conducted remotely, given where we are today with our COVID population and our COVID surge. The other piece is a hands-on in-person training, and then a 32-hour paid hands-on clinical portion. Another piece we also have offered is up to 6 hours of professional development training. So really thinking about time management and critical thinking and communication and resume development, et cetera, to really help folks be successful. The coursework is held during the evening hours, really to support participants who may already be working full-time or may have other commitments during the daytime hours. The program also provides really critical and crucial wraparound support services for the students. Examples of these wraparound services: providing Chromebooks for any participant students who need them. We've also provided transportation and childcare assistance to participants when needed as well. We expect the final cohort to kick off in January of 2022. And once that is completed, we will have enrolled over 44 students who, if successful, will be eligible to sit for and hopefully receive the Vermont State Licensed Nurse Assistant license. Through this program, the goal is twofold. One is providing an opportunity for education, providing an opportunity for upskilling and reskilling, but also, of course, developing a pipeline for these critical clinical support roles. It's just one example. I mean, it's a very small example of some of the work that we've been doing in other programs we've been exploring and hopefully implementing, really to help remove those barriers, to help provide opportunities for community, and also, of course, to develop a pipeline for us. We're also rolling out a similar program, partnering with the Community College of Vermont to train pharmacy technicians, which is another critical clinical partner for our teams. That program is a fully funded program as well. And graduates of that program will not only come out with a position as a pharmacy technician, but also with 24 college credits. So we're really looking forward to getting that work underway. Also looking at some other programs in the areas of surgical techs and dialysis technicians, and other areas that it's just such a critical and crucial need for those positions. A lot of this work is we're really, I mentioned a couple of the partners with our Community and Economic Development Office in Burlington and the Community College of Vermont. Many of these programs are also, we've received grants from both state and federal government, and those are crucial to moving these programs forward. So this work is just, again, it's just a small piece. We're really looking forward to other work that we can explore and other ways we can support not only our community, but also, filling the needs that we have within our network. So we're really looking forward to continuing that work.
And this is Elizabeth. Do we still have a few more minutes? I apologize that I am on the phone and not on the webinar.
I believe we do.
Great. So let me just transition from what Megan was saying. My name is Elizabeth Madigan. I work with Megan at the University of Vermont Health Network. I'm the Vice President of Organizational Development. And just wanted to share a couple more small, as Megan said, examples, but tangible, because it's both easy to learn from those types of examples, and we know that they've been successful so far that we're using, with a caveat that we still have an incredible amount to learn and to do in this space. And I go back to what Lou Bob said in the beginning of, and I've heard this sentiment from lots of our employees, that they too feel lost in this country, and that they have incredible knowledge, expertise, and skills, and they are underemployed within our system and within our community. So a few ways that we're continuing to try to remove barriers and offer support on the retention side is to continue to offer just paid classes around English, for GEDs, for training during work time, so upskilling, as Megan said, in a lot of areas where in healthcare, high demand, and we know some of our employees already have those skills, so how do we fast track those? So working with different partners to do that. And then two very specific other programs that have proved to be incredibly valuable. One is a resource coordinator, where we fund an employee of the United Way to be on site, so essentially part of our workforce, to support our employees with non-work but really urgent needs. And they range from evictions, legal assistance, food insecurity, housing, to driving lessons, finding driving instructors who speak different languages, who are willing to provide lessons at different times of the day, et cetera. So again, just how do we remove barriers proactively? And this person will come to staff meetings and share, here's how you sign up for fuel assistance. Here's how you do all of these things that you wouldn't know to do until you need them and they're too late. So we're trying to bring resources and support into our organization has been incredibly helpful from a retention perspective, as well as, you can imagine, an employee engagement perspective too. And another program that lots of organizations do, but I'll name it again, especially for different community members and legislators to hear, is a payroll advance loan. So partnering with a bank, it's a low interest loan. It's pretty much guaranteed. So for individuals who could not establish credit otherwise, who don't have access to money when they need it, we essentially underwrite it, and they're guaranteed the loan. The bank works closely with us and them. We have like a 1% at most default rate. So it's incredibly successful, but it allows individuals to establish credit and to have support and means that are really, really important and that we can often overlook, I think, as employers and as a community. So those are just a couple of, again, small examples of ways we're trying to both remove barriers and bring support directly to our people, with the understanding we have a lot more to do. So thank you just for the opportunity to learn from everyone today and to share those. And Sarah, I'll kick it back to you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Megan and Elizabeth, for sharing details of the professional development programming you're running at UVM. And I'm sure that the recruitment challenges that you have faced and the need to take a creative approach resonate with so many in our audience today. As we reach the end of our summit, I'm so honored to share a recorded statement from U.S. Senator Amy Klobuchar. Senator Klobuchar is the Senate co-sponsor of the Bridging Opportunities for New Americans Act. It's legislation that would create a national workforce study mirroring a type of the state studies you heard about today. Unfortunately, the senator was not able to join us live, but she did send along some thoughts for us right now. Senator Klobuchar, thank you so much for those powerful remarks and for your leadership. And thank you all to our speakers, panelists, refugee leaders who joined us today. Thank you for taking time on your Friday afternoon to join us and learn more about this work and opportunity in our country. We had more than 500 attendees today, representing 48 states and 20 countries. And it's been so exciting to bring this event together for the second time this year. I want to say a heartfelt thank you to my colleagues who worked behind the scenes so hard to bring this event together to you all today, especially Olivia Whiteley, Genevieve Kessler, Jessica Kepler, and Jen Reeves. Today's content has been recorded and will be shared at refugeeadvocacylab.org on our resources page. This is a biennial event with the next one planned for June 2022. So please keep an eye out for invitations in the spring to our June summit. If you have any questions about the content shared today, please don't hesitate to reach out to my colleague Genevieve Kessler at genevieve.kessler@rescue.org, and her email address is on the screen here too. Thank you again so much for giving us some of your time on a Friday afternoon to talk about these important issues, and wishing you all a happy new year. Thanks.